Hello and welcome to the newest episode of the Shape podcast. I'm Paulina and I'm hosting this episode with my co-host Junaid. We both work with the Saving Humanity and Planet Earth project, also known as the Shape Project. And we are very honored today to be joined by one of the world's most prominent thought leaders, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Professor Sachs needs no introduction, but just a few words about him are that he is an American economist and public policy analyst, a professor at Columbia University, as well as director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia. And he is also president of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network.
Yes, well, Professor Sachs's credentials are incredibly long, but suffice it to say, as Paulina said, right now, one of the leading contemporary intellectuals in the world who's giving voice to peace and justice in a very, as I would say, in a very prophetic way. So thanks, Professor Sachs, for joining us
Thank you for the kind words and for the chance to be with you. I appreciate it.
Right. So to kick things off, I will ask a question about one of the hot topics right now, which is the Ukraine war. So late last month, Zelensky visited the White House, where he had an exchange that many are calling an explosive confrontation with President Trump and Vice President Vance. During this difficult conversation, Trump suggested that either Ukraine strikes a ceasefire deal or the US would be out. And just over the past few days, we've heard reports that Ukraine is open to a 30-day ceasefire deal. So we would really like to know your thoughts on the change in US foreign policy, what that means, and where you see the Ukraine war going from here on out.
Well, first of all, the 30-day ceasefire is neither here nor there. This is not about a ceasefire. This is about ending a war, if the war is going to be ended. Ceasefires don't end wars. They take breaks between battles. So the question is, will we get to core issues to end this war? And now, the United States caused this war. The U.S. caused this war by basically regarding Russia as a has-been third-rate country that the United States could boss around as it saw fit, and for which the United States could assert its dominance in many ways, including expanding NATO, despite Russia's increasingly stressful opposition. In 1990, specifically February 7th, 1990, the US government and the German government promised the Soviet Union that NATO would not move 1 inch eastward. This was in the context of the negotiations over German reunification. As soon as the Soviet Union ended, the US leaders, in their full arrogance and hubris, said, well, okay, we won. Now we move NATO eastward. This is a bulwark of American geopolitical hegemony. And NATO began its eastward movement in plans in 1994 and the first accessions of Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic in 1999, and then 7 more countries, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia in 2004. And then in 2008, the United States pushed its allies, so-called in NATO, but basically these are all subordinate countries to the United States, to commit to Ukraine's and Georgia's membership in NATO. At that point, Russia said, stop, to hell with this. You are not going to surround us more. The United States, being the US, didn't hear, couldn't care, ignored Russia, believed it was all a bluff. Ultimately, this got us to the war because the US kept pushing. It even participated in a coup against the sitting Ukrainian president in February 2014. And finally, full-fledged war broke out in 2014. Attempts to stop the war in 2015, the so-called Minsk agreements, went by the wayside because Ukraine and the US were not interested in implementing the political parts of the Minsk agreements. And the US was not interested in negotiating with Russia because the US thought that it had the upper hand. NATO will enlarge whether Russia wants it or not. That was the bottom line. The Russian government said, no, that's what this war is about. Now, to come to your question, what does a 30-day ceasefire have to do with any of this? Nothing at all. The question for ending this war is what's going to happen to NATO, what's going to happen to territory, what's going to happen to security arrangements for Ukraine. A 30-day ceasefire is nothing without substance behind it. Now, we don't know exactly what's being discussed behind closed doors, presumably something. There were 8.5 hours of U.S. and Ukrainian senior officials behind closed doors in Jeddah last week. It did not take 8.5 hours to dictate a short statement by the two governments about a 30-day ceasefire. So I presume they were talking about something other than ordering coffee and negotiating this short statement. They were presumably talking about NATO, territories, and security guarantees. Whether they agreed on anything or not, we don't know, because as soon as the United States said, yes, NATO's not going to enlarge, Ukrainian officials said NATO will enlarge. As soon as the United States said territorial concessions, the Ukrainians said no territorial concessions. As soon as the United States said we're not going to be involved with security guarantees, France and Britain stood up and said security guarantees, and the United States is going to be involved. So everybody's negotiating in public. Whether they're negotiating in private, we don't really know. Frankly, the United States is going to walk away from this conflict, or already has. The U.S. does not want to fight this war longer. It's cruel to Ukraine in one sense. The U.S. caused this war, and then they walk away from it. Okay, I've been saying this for decades about U.S. foreign policy. I told the Ukrainians, you'll be the Afghanistan of Europe. They're literally becoming the Afghanistan of Europe, not only in having been the battlefield for the United States, but the U.S. just walking away. Come on. I'm an American. Listen to me. My government behaves irresponsibly. Get it? So that's what I tried to tell the Ukrainians. They said, oh, you're a Putin apologist. I said, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm no Putin apologist. I'm trying to give you a warning. I quoted Henry Kissinger's famous aphorism that to be an enemy of the United States is dangerous, and to be a friend is fatal. I tried to tell them that. They didn't believe it. So where are we today? Well, I don't know, because Zelensky every day says the impossible, because the British and the French say the stupid every day. More war, boots on the ground, Starmer, planes in the sky, boots on the ground. Come on. Don't get us all killed, and stop being so stupid. So this is where we are. I don't know the answer more than that. But it's not about a ceasefire. It's about ending a war.
Well, Professor Sachs, a lot of what you just said, I was just thinking the palace intrigues, the uncertainty, a lot of that we are also getting in the other conflict in West Asia, that is in Israel and Palestine, where the Trump administration coming, giving us hope of a ceasefire, hostage deal, but then you hear these statements about the Riviera, and so your assessment, just on in some ways, two things. One is, I know that you have very explicitly said that Benjamin Netanyahu himself personally has played such a horrible role for decades in driving U.S. policy in the Middle East. But beyond that, do you see any hope or optimism in terms of the power of what Netanyahu represents, that Zionist power, perhaps weakening in its hold on U.S. foreign policy?
I do. And there is a relationship of Ukraine and Gaza in the following sense. The Ukraine project was a U.S. deep state project. Of course, all presidents bought into it. The CIA basically ran the show of policy for a very long time. And was a deep consistency to U.S. foreign policy for more than 30 years, which is Russia's nothing. We are the hegemon. We will expand. Opposition by Russia does not mean anything. So that was 30 years of consistency. We've had 30 years of consistency with Israel as well. It's related, but it's not the same. But related in the following sense. Netanyahu and his American counterparts, say Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, Doug Feith, and others concocted an approach already back in the mid-1990s called Clean Break, which was very explicitly Israel will be dominating all of the territory of pre-1948 Palestine. It will rule over the Palestinians in one way or another. There will be no two-state solution. And as necessary, there will be regime changes of Arab states that oppose this dominance by Israel over Palestine. That's been the policy for 30 years. It's as consistent as the NATO enlargement. It has two fathers in this case, a little weird biology, but one is the neocons, because it's not inconsistent with the neocon vision of American hegemony in the Middle East. But the other is definitely Israel, and definitely Netanyahu's version of Israel, which is the Likud right-wing version, which has become an extremist right-wing nationalist Zionist semi-religious movement, also very weird concoction of allies. Now, what's the relationship of the deep state CIA piece of this and the Israel piece of this? Who's wagging the dog? Who runs the show? It's a little complicated because there's a lot of deep state in this vision of the Middle East. So this is not, in some sense, against the hegemonic model, not at all. But to think that this is somehow driven by the US, as was the case in Ukraine, where to drive it, you had to actually overthrow a Ukrainian government. This is not happening in Israel. The US is not overthrowing Israeli governments. It is subordinate to Israeli governments. It's subordinate in that every member of Congress has a handler, is handled by AIPAC, is watched, is primaried, is threatened, is bailed out with funds if they're good to Israel. There's a lot more sordid stuff that goes on. This has been a U.S. Israel operation. Also, it's worth mentioning that the U.S. deep state, which is the CIA basically, has as its counterpart Mossad. And there's a tremendously strong connection between the CIA and Mossad operationally all over the place, all over the world. So it's easier, by the way, for Trump to extricate himself from Ukraine than it is from Israel. With the case of Israel, he's got mega donors like the Adelsons and others. He's got Congress bought up by AIPAC. He's got the CIA and Mossad together, which is much stronger than the CIA and Ukrainian intelligence, which doesn't mean much for the United States. We give the intelligence, they process it. And this means that whatever Trump thinks as an individual, I don't really know, but whatever he thinks, it's much harder for the U.S. to extricate itself from the hold of the Israel lobby. And I should add, the Israel lobby is doing profound damage to the United States of America. This is nothing about America's interests. They're even now really breaking apart our universities. I take that a little personally as a member of an American university. This is an attack on the universities. It's an attack on U.S. society. It's vulgar, and Netanyahu is vulgar and properly indicted by properly under arrest warrant of the International Criminal Court. So I'm hoping that Trump can break free of this. I'm hoping that he wants to break free of this. I don't know. I don't talk to him personally. But if I were running an America First foreign policy, it's the first damn thing I would do is regain American control over Middle East policy.
Paulina, as long as I have a little bit of silence here, I'll throw in my last question before yours. And it was, I'm glad Professor Sachs did mention the term regime change, because I always like to also bring back the issue of Imran Khan and Pakistan, and there you can add CIA, Mossad, and the ISI. involved there. So Professor Sachs, I always ask you to speak about this, not just because of its importance, but because there is such a paucity of awareness of what has gone wrong in Pakistan and what the Biden administration facilitated. So could you just give a few of your thoughts on that?
Basically, people have to understand American foreign policy. American foreign policy is unique in the world. With other countries, they engage in a process that we call diplomacy. That means actually governments deal with other governments. In the case of the United States, the idea is that there's no diplomacy. There are allies, which means you listen to us, we're the United States, and you're our allies, okay? And then there are adversaries. Adversaries come in two kinds. One are the overt adversaries. Russia's an adversary, China's an adversary, and so forth. And then there are the insidious adversaries who proclaim neutrality. The United States hates neutrality. It's the worst. I've come to see that emotionally it works even less well than being an overt adversary, because the United States says, you're out to get us. You're really with our foes because you're not 100% with us. It's stunning. Now, the difference of American foreign policy is that when it comes to the adversaries of these two types, if you don't like what they're doing, you try to overthrow them. And this is quite different. You engage in regime change. There are two kinds of regime changes. There are the overt regime changes. Those are wars, like the 2003 war against Iraq or the 2011 war against Libya. There are planes in the sky, there's bombing, and it's not hidden from view. Those are overt regime change operations. They're to topple a different government. Then there are covert regime change operations, which roughly have a ratio of about 10 covert to 1 overt operation. The covert operations are essentially CIA, NSC, some Pentagon, some others, operations to destabilize other countries and bring down the regimes. There are many ways to do this. You can create financial crises, you can create unrest, you can create color revolutions, you can create assassinations, you can create coups, and so forth. So there's a whole set of mechanisms. Lindsay O'Rourke, a political scientist at Boston College, wrote a book called Covert Regime Change in 2017. It's a superb book. She documents 64 covert regime change operations of the United States between 1947 and 1989. So this is unique to America. It's unique in the sense that it's the go-to policy. Of course, the French overthrow governments, the British overthrow governments, but they're kind of has-been empires. So they can't do it as much. They don't have the same bravado. They don't have the same networks. They don't have the same hubris. If they could do it, believe me, they do it. But it's the United States that does it. When it comes to popular officials like Imran Khan, a very intelligent, very charismatic, very popular leader of Pakistan, who said, I'm for Pakistan, Pakistan first, and we need decent relations with China, with Russia, and with the United States. That's perfidious from the American point of view. What do you mean, not being an enemy of our enemy? That's very dangerous. So when Imran Khan expressed words of Pakistan's independence, after all, a country of nearly 300 million people, for heaven's sake, it could have its own foreign policy.
He was accused of aggressive neutrality, Professor Sachs.
There you go. Well, this is America. That's pure Americana, by the way. Well, the U.S. government decided, okay, this guy's got to go, and they use their connections with the military in Pakistan, with the parliamentarians in Pakistan, and basically profoundly subverted democracy. So also this whole thing about Western values, if anybody believes in that anywhere, please wake up. Uh, Western values are on display in Gaza. Western values are on display in regime change operations. There are no Western values except market values of firms owned by American or other companies. Believe me, this is not about values, democracy, baloney. It is absolutely about America not accepting other countries having not even hostile relations, but just independent relations with the countries that America has deemed to be adversaries. So they brought down Imran Khan, and then one horrible thing after another with this gentleman, with this popular leader, with this democratic leader, which is physical threats to his life repeatedly, which is imprisonment, which is hoked up charges, and all the time the United States, with its thumb in its mouth, saying, "Oh yes, we respect the judicial processes of Pakistan." It's dreadful. It's a disgrace, but it's very typical.
Well, just to bounce off of some of the themes you were talking about in terms of, perhaps Western values not so much being compatible with the world we see today, I wanted to hear your views on the emergence of coalitions like BRICS and just the general idea of a multipolar order. In that sense, where do you see the world heading? Do you believe that multipolarity could be a positive global development that enhances cooperation and innovation? So yeah, please take it away.
Yeah, well, multipolarity is a fact. Multipolarity means that no one country or region runs the world. That's a rude awakening to the United States, which was absolutely convinced after 1991 that it and it alone ran the world. It's quite an awakening for the North Atlantic region. I don't call it the West because I don't know what the West means, but I do know what the North Atlantic means. The North Atlantic means the United States, Britain, and continental Europe, which believe for roughly the last 300 years that they run the world and has been basically on the ascendancy for 500 years. So this is a very rude awakening for the North Atlantic world and especially in the short term for the US world. But what is multipolarity? Multipolarity is nobody's got a chokehold on technology. Uh, Nobody has a monopoly on nuclear arms, obviously. Nobody has a monopoly on space capacity because uh, there are space agencies that launch uh, that launch space vehicles and satellites and other technologies in the US and Europe and Russia and China and India and elsewhere, by the way. Nobody has a monopoly on AI. Nobody has a monopoly on, of course, physical manufacturing, on shipbuilding, on uh, drone production, on countless other things. The United States is 4.1% of the world population, a much larger percent of the world arrogance, by the way, but it doesn't run the world. And this is what multipolarity is. There are hierarchies of countries depending on their power, economy, demography, scope, and political cultures. But great powers definitely include the United States, uh, Russia, China, and India, undoubtedly. And major powers include other nuclear powers like Pakistan or other regional entities. Now, where is the world going? Well, one place it could be going is to blow itself up because we're sufficiently stupid to gamble the world's future. And we have politicians in the North Atlantic region. Biden was one of them, by the way. Starmer and Macron continue to be, who are filled with bravado, arrogance, no sense, and they're also themselves nuclear armed, but they taunt Russia with vastly larger arsenals of nuclear weapons. The whole thing is crazy, the way people talk to each other right now, the way governments interact with each other. There is a general principle in economics that I believe in, which is called convergence or conditional convergence, which is nobody has the ability to stay ahead of the pack in an unlimited way. And I've always believed for my whole professional career, and time has borne me out, that Asia was on a path of catching up. That's part of a very long swing of history, because if you look at not the last 500 years, but the last 2,500 years, things look a lot different from the last 500 years. And Asia's rapid catching up since 1950 is part of that story right now. So I've bet my intellectual view on regarding Asia on that, on convergence. It's been right for my whole career. There's been continuing catching up. I believe in it. And so this means that multipolarity is real. What do we need to do to make it work? First, the major powers need to stay out of each other's faces so that we don't blow each other up. Keep some distance. What a perfect vocation for Ukraine, to be neutral. Safe for them, and safer for the US and Russia not to be in each other's face. Neutrality is a positive virtue, not just a kind of fait accompli. And neutral countries in Europe, like Sweden, traditionally up until the recent NATO accession, Sweden, Finland, Austria, Switzerland, my God, they're the most successful countries of all, the happiest, the most stable. But we don't take yes for an answer in the United States. Neutral will overthrow you. And that was the mistake. So what is the principles of multipolarity? Great powers should stay out of each other's way. Countries should, I think, aggregate regionally. And I think that this is happening, but it needs to happen in a more coherent way. I'd like to see Europe get its act together, not as vassals of the United States, but as Europe, which has a lot of very important positive things to offer. But war with Russia is not one of them, and vassalage to the United States is not one of them. So I'd like to see Europe have that. I want a strong African Union. I would like a strong Islamic world, actually, that I believe could include not only the Arab League countries, but also Turkey, Central Asian countries from Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, also Pakistan and Afghanistan. So I see
Under
the
Imran Khan,
groupings.
of course. Yeah.
Yes, I see the groupings as very interesting and different. I don't really believe in SARC working, which is the South Asian region, but I do believe in Afghanistan and Pakistan working together with Iran and with the Gulf countries and so forth. So I think regional groupings have a very big role to play. I'm a big fan of ASEAN, and think that probably Bangladesh should join ASEAN. Maybe even in a different kind of world, Australia, New Zealand, for really respecting the regions, not the hegemonic divisions of the world or the bloc visions of the world. So all of this is to say, UN Charter, let's not kill each other, stay out of each other's lanes when it comes to the great powers, and regional integration, because that's good for the economy, the ecology, the physical infrastructure, and also culture. So that's the kind of world that I hope is taking shape.
Great. Professor Sachs, thank you so much for being that prophetic voice that we so much need to dig through the fog of propaganda today. And again, I can't end this conversation without saying from the many Pakistanis who see your name as one of the very few Western public intellectuals that continues to be in support and solidarity with the movement for democracy in Pakistan. So thank you, Professor
We're going to
Sachs.
get it's going to happen, and Imran is going to be one of the great prime ministers in the years ahead. So we're
Inshallah,
counting
God
on
willing.
that.
Yes,
Thank you
so
very
much
much.
for your time, Professor Sachs.
Great to be with you.